This episode is brought to you by Arcat. You've heard us talk about Arcat in our podcast by now, and hopefully you've had time to visit their site. This is a great tool for you, from small architecture firms to government agencies. Everyone can benefit from what they've created. The content libraries in Arcat are huge and full of free content. CAD, BIM, specifications, and more. Why is this important to you? Because Arcat has done all the work for you. Need a spec? It's in the CSI 3-part master format and available in multiple file formats. And this is just one example. Arcat has tons of building product content ready for you to use. It's all free and you don't have to register to download content. If you use other sites like we have, you must register to get content. Why bother with that? Go to this episode's sponsor, Arcat, and visit them at arcat.com.
We are also brought to you by HMC Architects. Learn more about them at hmcarchitects.com. Let's give them a listen.
Ontario, California may not strike visitors as an upscale destination, but the Greater Ontario Convention and Visitors Bureau wants to change that, so they partnered with HMC Architects to modernize and rebrand. Hi, this is Kyle Peterson. I'm an architect at HMC Architects' Ontario, California studio. Meet, explore, and connect in tomorrow's West. That's the vision we're aspiring to when redesigning 3 of Ontario's tourist destinations. The California Welcome Center in Ontario Mills, not your average map and brochure stop. It's a tech-savvy destination to book hotels, buy theme park tickets, and explore dining options. With crisp, modern interiors, visitors can soak up the Wi-Fi and the Inland Empire vibe. The Ontario Welcome Center is at Ontario International Airport. Our design blends native materials and bright colors to encourage visitors to stop in and learn more about the region. And the new cafe and outdoor courtyard at the Ontario Convention Center. Cafe Connect is cooking up hot breakfast sandwiches, premium coffee, and grab-and-go items. With a comfortable outdoor courtyard, convention attendees can eat, relax, and enjoy Ontario's sunny skies. First impressions are everything, and we're using architecture to redefine that moment when a visitor arrives in Ontario for the first time. At HMC Architects, we believe that a successful design is one that ultimately enriches our communities. To become part of our story, visit hmcarchitects.com.
Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 115 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Droxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And to get us started off for this episode, Cormac, you brought up an interesting topic that you've been kind of struggling with or asking us about recently. So why don't you get us started tonight and talk a little bit about what that struggle's been?
Sure. That struggle. All right, sure. So kind of in the office, we've been talking about, well, just kind of a broad painting of the picture. We've been doing what's now called an integrated design practice, where we're taking what used to be compartmentalized design studios, student life, and then we have our arts and sciences and all these other different kind of general practice ones. We're kind of merging them together. And as we're doing that, we're going after more projects and we're hiring more people and things like that. And so one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, and what seems to be somewhat of a struggle with, is mentorship. And how do we onboard people, as they're coming out of school or to our firm? And so I kind of was interested in thinking about how we were onboarded, how we were mentored, and what it was like when we were fresh out of school, and how did we learn what we've gained knowledge-wise, and how did that translate into how we mentor people now, how we teach people now, how we do OJT with them and things like that. And so just kind of wanted to kind of pose that question to you guys, is like, how were you mentored? How did they deal with little fresh out of the school of yelling at clouds, Neil Pan?
Well, wait a minute. So if you want my version, Cormac, my version's probably very different from some of our listeners. That the fact that I did it a few years ago. So a couple of different things. First off, to answer
I
that
think
question.
Wait, real quick though. I think you're misunderstanding the word few. Few's usually like 3, 4, maybe.
A few decades. How's that? Is that better for you?
Okay. Yeah, we got you now.
No, so I mean, when I first started working for an architect right out of high school, and there really wasn't. It was a sole proprietor, so there really wasn't a mentorship, any sort of official sort of policy or practice or anything like that. I mean, I just worked for him, and I kind of learned how to draft or how to do, simple little projects or things that we were doing at the time. And so there was that aspect of my career. And then there was one a little bit later after school when I graduated and started working for a larger firm. And at first there really wasn't any sort of learning, onboarding, anything like that, because we were still doing it all by hand at that point. And slowly we started using the computers to draft. And so at the time, so that's kind of the part one. But part two, what I was going to get at is that the official onboarding or official mentor learning process, at least of that part, was you sat in one of the principal's offices and he threw the book for the software in front of you and said, okay, start going through that. And I'm here plan checking drawings. And if you have questions, I'm here to ask. And that was kind of you sat in his office for 3 or 4 weeks, kind of doing that and slowly, branching up and starting to do little, parts of projects and things. And then you kind of were shoveled off to your own desk and you kept going. So that was the official learning process. But on the larger scope of kind of mentorship, which is, I want to get back and ask you this, because I want to ask what mentorship means to each of you, because it's always been something that has intrigued me or mystified me almost, and it may have something to do with how I entered the industry and how I kept working through the industry in smaller firms at first, several sole proprietors, and in one office that was only like 4 people at the time. And so I think I have a very different view of mentorship than maybe some people, but maybe my experience was everybody else's definition of mentorship. So, I mean, that's kind of...
It sounded nothing different than what you just said.
Well, that's what I'm curious. I mean, I only know my own experience, of course, and what we've talked about over the years on this show. But what I'm curious is I hear other people talking about having a mentor or being a mentor. And I've really I'm being very honest. I'm not sure I understand what that means.
To me, mentorship is the deliberate, guided, and I'm trying not to do like a Webster type definition of it, but it's a deliberate, guided educational process. I mean, that a firm is pairing a new person up with an experienced person, and they're just kind of showing them the ropes of how to do certain things, where to find information about things. Sort of back up a little bit before I kind of, whether or not I've even answered it or can answer it, is very similar situation, Neil, is like right after graduation. When I started working for a smaller firm, it was 5 people, and it was 5 people plus 2 principals, so 7 people. And I was asked basically to start working on a small project and start cutting wall sections. I mean, I just got out of school. I kind of sort of know what a wall section is, but to know what I'm expected in a professional environment on what a wall section was, had no real clue. Had no one there to really teach me. And so I go and I ask my boss. He hands me Architectural Graphic Standards and says, you figure it out. You start working on it. Come back to me tomorrow with what you've come up with. And then we'll talk about what you've done right, what you've done wrong, and we'll figure it out from there. But I want you to start to guide your own education where to look for the right things. And he literally was kind of a by the book sort of guy. And what I mean by that is that he basically said, you will find it in these books. You will find it in the suites catalogs. You will find it the architectural graphic standards, or you'll find it in whatever Ching book that we've got floating around. You will find it somewhere. And if it doesn't exist, what you'll do is you'll try to figure out how to make it up and then go back and find the science to make sure it's right. And so that was really, my mentorship was somewhat of a self-guided mentorship. Whereas I really didn't have anybody sitting next to me or throwing a CAD manual at me sitting there and saying, just go at it, kid.
I think that's not too different from what a lot of the millennial generation deals with today. And instead of a book, it's Google or whatever.
It is, or ARCAT.
And I don't think that that's necessarily the right answer. I totally get why it happens. But to me, like, to try to answer Neil's question, to me, it's a relationship and it's an investment. And it's not, I don't think that it should be treated so just cut and dry, informational, almost like, and I know there's a distinction here, like with what you're saying, Cormac, which is like, you figure it out and then you can come back and ask questions and we'll kind of go over the small stuff together. But I feel like it's much more than a "you're bothering me" kind of a thing, or I don't have time for this. I don't want to put words in your mouth because I wasn't there, but that's how it kind of comes across. And I think people do have that experience. So I don't think that that's totally invalid, but I think that if it is that kind of a thing, then it's not the right kind of thing.
So let me go back to why I kind of wanted to talk about this topic. And you actually hit it very perfectly on the head. It's the way that we start to onboard people, most specifically new hires right out of college, that they've got their degree, they've got the wide eyes, they're ready to get in and start getting their hands dirty. The problem is that we're just not ready for them. And so we kind of throw them into situations where they're not learning what they could be learning, or they're not experiencing what they could be experiencing. And that's when disillusion happens. Yeah. And that's when they start to, say, was this really what I want to do? Is, just kind of sit here and kind of spin my wheels, or, oh, look, they've got another graphic design thing for me to do where I'm get to doing some Photoshop because, hey, look, the new kid knows how to do Photoshop, or the new kid knows how to do SketchUp or something like that. And we just kind of put them in kind of these like almost monotonous, menial kind of tasks rather than really kind of helping them get into the meat of what they got into architecture for in the first place.
Well, the only way that it's ever going to be the antithesis of that is you're going to have a plan. So right. It can't just be, oh my God, they're here. What are we going to do with them?
Exactly. Which is where the struggle comes from.
Yeah. So you've got to, your company has, and this goes for any company, you've got to have a plan. And then this is something that we've kind of started to do. And so it's funny because you're a 100-year-old firm, we're a 75-year-old firm, and we don't have this completely figured out. But I don't think it's not an impossible task to figure out. And I think that with some intention to onboard people and make them feel like they're doing meaningful, productive work and they're not just kind of treading water and people are just playing hot potato with that person, you've got to have a plan in place on how they're going to figure out where they fit in at your firm if they weren't hired for something very specific. If they're hired to fill a position because you need bodies to do things, you don't know what their strengths are, you don't know what their weaknesses are, you don't know who they work well with, you don't know their personality type too well. I mean, all you've been through is 1 or 2 or maybe 3 interviews. I mean, you don't know what they're like. And so there's got to be kind of this initial process to figure out what that is. And I feel like if that's an intentional process and people do kind of move around and work with different people and figure out what that works, and then you can ask them, so how to go? What did you like? What needs to happen here for you? Where do you want to begin, right? Your career. And I think that that's a totally great way to start to approach it. That didn't happen for me. I'm So I think that, we're all kind of trying to figure this out as we go along.
So how did it happen for you?
Well, I was interning when I was in school, and I started out just in any position I could get a job in. And I feel like I wasn't doing architecture when I was working in an architect's office, but I was doing entitlements, which is a fancy word for saying funding for school projects. And so I basically did spreadsheets when I started interning. So talk about like not matching up the skill set to what you're being trained to do in school. I mean, I was the poster child for that. I was just doing whatever they told me to do. And it was basically the exact thing that you were just talking about. Oh, crap, they're here. What do we have for them today? So it was a very reactive process. There was no intention to it. And so when I started off doing that, and I showed, hey, yep, I can work a computer, I can do this, I can do that. And, this is back in the early to mid 90s. And then I started drawing these plan diagrams. So I learned CAD. And that's when I actually started to get mentored, was with kind of our lead CAD person at the firm at that time. I went through 2 weeks of intensive training. So I wasn't being trained out of a book, which I felt was like extremely valuable because I could actually use those skills back in school because we didn't have formal CAD classes. We all drew by hand. And that actually kind of kickstarted me into doing 3D modeling and CAD drafting in school too. So it helped me there. So it was kind of a two-way street now. So that mentorship, I think, really helped. And I remember this one specific day in CAD training when, it was MicroStation. The screen was covered in icons, right? Because it was completely icon driven. It wasn't command line driven. And the guy was like, okay, push that button that does this thing. And I'm like, I can't find it. There's 200 icons. He's like, Sure you can. And he just sat there. Yeah. And basically it was telling me like, you've got to put the effort in also.
Right.
I can't just sit here. I'm not just going to tell you step by step what to do. We're working together. And I kind of felt like that was great. I totally took that and ran with it. And I felt like, yep, he's totally right. Like, I'm not going to cop out and just do the easy thing. I'm going to figure it out. And that is just one small example of kind of the relationship that we had, where he was not going to completely hold my hand as I did every little thing, which is kind of what you guys are saying too, when you started off, right? I mean, but it was a little more harsh than that. It was like, here's the book, here's the Photoshop Bible, learn Photoshop or whatever, AutoCAD. And so I feel like where did it go from there? It went all over the place. And I think eventually I found somebody who really wanted to help me become an architect and not just fulfill a job role. And ultimately, the relationship got to a point where it wasn't a mentor-mentee, it was a mentor-mentor process where we were sharing, we would call each other for advice all the time. And so he would call me and ask me for advice, and I would call him and ask him for advice. And to me, that's the best kind of mentorship that can happen. If you can find the right fit, the right match for you, is that it's going to be a mentor-mentor relationship. So really, I'm mentoring up, or I guess we're just mentoring across, because there's not this stigma of here's the person who knows everything and here's the peon. It's not that at all. It became a relationship where I added value to his life and he added value to my life or professional career, however you want to say it.
Evan, I think that's fantastic. I mean, you found something that was fulfilling to you and fulfilling to the person who was mentoring you and helping you. When you bring that up, it does remind me of the people I worked with or for. I guess I didn't really see the learning process as a mentor-mentoree sort of process, but that's probably what I experienced. I think I experienced a lot more of the figure it out sort of stage. But one thing that came to mind when you were talking about that for me was there was a gentleman, in fact, the same gentleman who was here's the book, learn. And I mentioned earlier, he did plan checking in our office. So he plan checked everything. And he did it in such a way that he would, if there was a detail you had drawn wrong, he would sketch it right next to it. And, if there were notes that were maybe written incorrectly or needed to be written properly, or dimensioning, kind of maybe the way you had dimensioned it was not, say, the proper way, he would actually draw it next to you. So that's it, beyond just being red lines for you to pick up. What he would do is that when he was done with the plan check, he would call you, he would schedule a time. And then you would go sit in his office and you'd sit down for half an hour or an hour, and he would walk you through everything that he did and why he did it. And I didn't probably realize it at the time, because of course when you turn in a project, you're hoping, oh, okay, I hope I did everything right. Or at least if you knew you did something wrong, you knew where it was going to be, or maybe you didn't have time to do something, and mark up or fill up all the details or something. But it was a really important process, because I probably learned so much more through that process. So to me, I never really thought of him as a mentor, but that's certainly what he was doing, whether it was necessarily intentional or not.
Yeah, I think that kind of shows leadership, right? Because what that person's doing is they're not necessarily just handing you a thing that says, here's how I did it, right? Or even an experience or whatever. They're not just saying, well, this is how I did it, but they're actually tailoring it. They're tailoring an experience for you that's saying, this is what you could do. This is how you can do it. We all know that there's lots of ways to do things. And I think that if you have a relationship with somebody who can tailor it to you and how you think, or maybe they can remove a barrier that's specific to you, then that is a really great mentorship kind of relationship that you've got with that person. And so if they're actually taking the time to sit down with you and invest in you and show you why it works this certain way, that's a really good clue that person has taken that interest in you, and that there's that potential there to become that mentor-mentee or mentor-mentor relationship.
That to me is a mentor process right there, is sitting down with the newer person and experience, however we want to phrase it, and going through on the whys we do what we do, and why is this relationship with this door and this hold off the wall, and why do we do that? It was interesting, is we had a conversation in the office just the other day. Somebody came up and said, when I'm drawing a door, what do you draw? Do you draw it 4 inches off the wall to the jamb? Or do you do it 4 inches off the wall plus the jamb? And so we kind of we sat around, and the guy was, kind of new. And so we were sitting there talking about, what the value of why one is right over the other one, and why that is, and stuff like that. And even just a simple conversation like that, to me, is part of the mentoring process. And talking through little details like that of what's the best practices for the weight, how far a door should sit off of a wall on the hinge side. That's what we were talking about is, hinge side, how far does that sit off the wall? And it's just like in the whys. Why do we do that? Well, if it's got hold open hardware, or if it's got this or that, and so they can kind of understand the little new minutia of things really does matter. And what this guy was doing with you, Neil, is showing you why all these little minor details that you may have missed on the thing were important, because the relationships of this to that and things like that have a big effect on constructability. But they're things that you didn't know because you were newer and fresh out of school, and you really didn't have much in the way of, and I'm just kind of guessing here, but you didn't have much in the way of construction experience, so you were really learning how to do those things through this guy's experience and him passing on knowledge about the way that he redlines things. Through his experience, he says that this should be this way and this should be that way, because that's, what he found out in the field, the best practices for things. Things like that to me, and that's kind of why I said, it's the deliberate passing on of knowledge and experience, is he's going through that effort. Now, you may not see it as mentoring at the time because you're just thinking he's doing his job by, well, he had to redline these drawings and he had to sit down and explain to me what all these red lines mean so that I could pick it up properly. But really what he's doing is he's doing his job by redlining them and making sure it was right. But he's actually kind of going the extra mile of sitting down and explaining to you all of the adjacencies and nuances and stuff like that, rather than just handing them to you and say, here, kid, get at it.
So I'm curious, we've all kind of talked a little bit about our previous experiences. How does those experiences affect what we do in our respective offices today?
Well, a lot of what I just explained about the guy, sitting down with you and going through it, I do very much the same thing, where I'll do one of two things. I'll either redline it out and then sit down and kind of talk through things, or I'll sit down with the person that I'm going to be handing the red lines off to and redline them together and kind of show them the process that I go through when I'm looking for in doing a red line set. I've kind of got a process. I've got like little checklists of things that I look for and stuff like that. And I kind of go through all of these with them to kind of show them why I do the things that I do. Why does this dumpster belong here and not over here? Or, just little things to big things, detailing, things that affect the design, all sorts of everything that I could possibly think of. Kitchen sink, the whole shebang. I'm just going to sit there and kind of throw it out there and talk about every little bit of the project. And then, when I get through the architectural side of the drawings, then we'll sit down and even go through it further on why our decisions in design affect mechanical, structural, electrical, those kind of things, and what to look for when you're coordinating a set with all of the other disciplines, and let them really understand that this is a very cohesive process, that you kind of need to think of everything and the whys of why we have to think of everything. Does that make...
I think we have to create a place where people know that it's safe to ask for help. And so there's a constant kind of attitude, I guess, that I want to know what you think we should do. I mean, if somebody comes to me and asks for help and they say, what do I need to do here? I mean, a common reply would be, what do you think we should do here? Because I don't want to just give an answer. I want to kind of understand where they're coming from. And I feel like that's really important, to get that investment and ownership from that person in the project, and get it out on the table so that we can then respond to that and say, okay, well, I mean, think about it. Like when you were in college and you had a desk crit, I hope it wasn't just somebody telling you what to do. I mean, it's your project, right? And so you have to be fully invested in it. And I kind of feel like that's how we have to treat these situations in our studios now, the same way. It's got to be a safe environment. They have to be able to learn where to ask for help. And then it's not for me to just solve the problem for the person, but it's let's work and think through this together, and let's figure this out together. Because as a leader, right, if my team can't succeed, I can't succeed. So if the person who's coming and asking for my help fails, I fail, right? Because they're the future. They're the future of my project. They're the future of my team. They're the future of the company. And so it is totally on me to pour into them. And if I don't do that, then what's the point, right? Because I'm only going to be there. I'm only going to last for so long before this doesn't work anymore. I burn people out. They leave, whatever, So I just feel like it's on us to create a safe place for that to happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of talked about the team makeup, because the team makeup is just as important of a mentoring process as kind of like sitting down and, like I was kind of highlighting more of like a project management type style of, mentoring as we're in like, say, a CD phase or something. I was a little bit more specific. And when we're doing this is kind of the process of how I do it. But even as far back as the formation of the team itself and kind of clearly defining what roles and responsibilities are for everybody within the team, so that at least when you're going into a project, you're going in with expectations of what at the bare minimum of what you should be doing, and then be able to build from there and be able to have the conversation that, hey, look, I know that, my role as, say, the project architect is this, but I really think that, as long as I can display that I know what I'm doing in this role, that I really want to learn how to do that, and can you help me, kind of thing. So I think going back and kind of establishing almost a mentor type role within the early formation of a project team. Because I've seen where you put together a team and it's just not working. Maybe you get a couple of like hot-headed egos or things like that, and then you've got a bunch of other people working with them or underneath them or whatever else, and not only does the project itself suffer, but so does the development of those people, because they're not being utilized the right way, or they're being pulled between egos. I'm sure you've seen this happen in the past, where it's just mentorship and an experience are just like completely hampered by just the way a team is, which is why the way a team interacts.
Yeah, and I would go so far as to say that you have to add more investment outside of the office hours also. The more personal you can get as far as investing into asking questions about the person's life, the more safe it's going to become. Like, that investment is real. It's not just about what happens on the project, but getting to know somebody more personally, I think, is going to make a better relationship, and ultimately it's going to make a better mentorship exchange, right? Because I feel like the more that I can listen to what that person's excited about in their life, what's going on. I mean, are they passing exams outside of the office? Are they starting a family? What are their hobbies? Just the more that I can listen and find out about that stuff, I feel like that's building that relationship, right? Because like when I do mentoring on my project, it's much different than when we all get together for happy hour when somebody passes an exam. It's a really different dynamic, but it all feeds each other, right? Because if we can have a good time outside the office, we're probably going to have a better time in the office. And I feel like that all helps make that mentorship potential even greater.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to say, you said something earlier, Evan, I think is important that I want to touch on again, which is the feeling of being or creating a safe environment to ask questions. I think that it can be very intimidating for anyone, even somebody like myself, to approach, say, one of the other principals in the office I work in now and ask them a question, or appear that, okay, I'm supposed to be someone of some relatively senior status, right? And yet what I try and do, first off, it can be difficult to go ask somebody. And
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're getting paid to work there, right? So you almost feel like I shouldn't have to ask any questions, right? Because they're paying me to work here, and I should have these answers. So I think people are a little bit more into searching online for answers rather than asking the ASG way or whatever, right? Because then I don't look so stupid.
Right.
Whereas in school, I was paying for that education, so I'm allowed to ask stupid questions. I think that's a big mental hurdle for people to get over.
I think it's a very difficult hurdle. It's one that everyone should try and get over. One of the things that I try and do is, in fact, actually the person that works with me right now is sometimes when she asks me something about, and I'm working on kind of a new product types that I haven't worked on before, so I don't really have a lot of experience with it. And so I'll be very honest with her. So to help create this sort of safe environment, I'm honest and I say, I don't know either. And I say, instead of though going immediately to ask somebody else, I say, well, let's spend a few minutes and try and figure it out. Let's grab the code book. Let's read this section, read that section, maybe look online for something if it's jurisdictional about the jurisdiction, and we go look. And if we don't know the answer at that point, then maybe we will go ask. But we go in and we ask with knowledge. We say, okay, this is what we found. We're not quite getting to what we need to know. What's been your experience, or how should we detail this 1 hour wall condition? The code says this. What am I missing? What do I not have? So I try and teach the practice of, it's okay not to know. And I freely admit I don't know things, so that I can be the example of that sort of, to create that safe environment. Because if I don't know and she doesn't know something, I'm hoping that and I admit I don't, I'm hoping that she or anyone I work with knows that it's okay to ask, hey, I just don't know. But I also try and teach the fact that at the same time, if we don't know, let's try and, let's go search, go look. And if we don't find the right answer, or don't have enough of what we need, then we can go ask somebody. And I think what helps me, at least a little bit in my office, is most of the senior people in the office, I grew up knowing them, and because I've worked there before, so many of them I've known for 20 plus years. So to me, it's like I can walk in and freely admit, yeah, okay, I don't know something, or I'm looking for some advice. Where I think the challenge, at least in our firm right now, is that at least my impression, I should say this is my impression, that I think some of the younger staff, they don't have that comfortableness or that ability to go up to one of the principals and say, hey, I need some help with this, or I don't understand this, or why did you design it this way? Or I'm having difficulty, developing the details for that. I don't think they really feel comfortable with that, because a lot of our principals now they're traveling, they go to our other offices, they're not always in the office. And some of them are now principals. When I worked there, they were nothing more than, project managers or something. They weren't principals at the time. So I have a little bit of a different sense of them, and that helps me. And I try and project that same sort of openness to the people that I work with. And I hope that helps. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's an example that I was just thinking of that really made a mark one day, and no pun intended. It was my friend and mentor Mark, who he was just sitting at his desk. He was working on sketching and trying to figure out kind of adjacencies and stuff for a plan. And another friend of mine had come over, and he was much lower on the ladder of experience in the office. And he was just there. We were just kind of chatting, and Mark, who sat next to me, I mean, he's been working in architecture for over 30 years. And so he was really struggling with this layout. And he just said it out loud. Man, this is hard. And he's been working on it for 2 days, and he still hasn't figured it out. I mean, it is a really tough problem. And it meant so much to my other friend, who was just standing there to witness that. To know that you can have been in this business for that long and things can still be really hard to figure out. And he said, man, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I was just struggling with something very similar, and I felt like an idiot because it was so hard. Why don't I have this figured out yet? And to see somebody else who's been in the business for so long say that the same thing that he was thinking really just reassured him. And it showed him that this happens to everybody, right? It's not just you. A lot of times I think we just feel alone, right? And if we don't feel like we can reach out and ask for help, I mean, it totally changed the environment when he saw somebody who he regarded at a much higher level. He just created a safe place right there to say, I can't figure this out either. Let's now try to figure this out together. And I think, Neil, that goes directly to what you're talking about, right? If you're struggling with something but you feel comfortable going to the other people in the firm and asking them, it would be awesome if you just grabbed a really young person and said, hey, come with me and just listen to this, right? I'm struggling with this. I'm going to go ask them for help. This is how you do it. And just to show that comfort is just part of the job, because we have to get to the bottom of this one way or another, right? I can struggle with it for a week, or I can just go ask these two people over here who probably know the answer. I mean, that creates that safety, that example of how it should be in the office.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And then also something else I try and actively do is that for actually just this afternoon, we had a conference call with the client about a new project to talk about the schedule, how we could maybe squeeze the schedule, and what kind of the timeline so we can, be permitted by the end of the year. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that has to happen. And earlier in the day, the person who was helping me, she came to me and she had a number of questions about the project. And I'm like, I don't know that. I don't know that. It's a new project, and neither one of us are familiar with it yet. We haven't visited the site. It's an existing apartment complex. And so I said, well, write these questions down. And I said, we have this conference call later in the afternoon. And I said, well, join us and, we'll ask those questions. And we didn't really ask many of those questions during the conference call, but I thought it was really kind of, I hope it was a great experience for her to sit in on this call and at times watch the both of us like struggle, because of course the client's trying to squeeze the schedule as much as possible. And we're both like not wanting to do that and give us ourselves as much reasonable time as possible. But I think that for her, it was probably a really fascinating experience to sit back and listen on this conference call as the two of us went back and forth throughout, and to see us, I wouldn't say, struggle would be one way to say it. We weren't struggling, but just how did we handle the situation and talk ourselves through the process and negotiating with the client and everything. I think for somebody who's a year out of school, I think that's a great experience, because it shows the process that we have to go through to, work with our clients, right? Because ultimately that's what we also end up doing. In addition to, we got to produce these drawings over here, but a part of our work is dealing with the clients and negotiating the contracts and dealing with all of the other stuff that's the business side, right?
Right. Well, before we can even put pen to paper and start drawing something, we got to deal with the clients. We've got to go through all of these things that really aren't the first thing on people's minds when they're becoming architects is, all of the business side of things. But it's really the business side of things that help enable us to do all of the, fun, pretty drawings and things like that. I'm glad you actually brought that up, because that's talking about involving interns, who are involving them in the meetings, whether it's a design meeting, whether it's a client meeting, whether it's contract negotiation. It's all of these little things that we're thinking that we would probably rather have them working on a set of drawings or something like that, or, hey, there's a toilet room plan that needs to get done. And rather than doing that, have them actively involved in all of these meetings just to kind of see how a meeting is supposed to go, or what may be the right way or wrong way to kind of deal with or talk to a client or a consultant or somebody like that. And just being there as an observer is probably just as much of a valuable tool to teach somebody something, rather than just kind of like having them sit back, oh no, you just stay at your desk and do these drawings. We'll, the grown-ups will have their meeting and we'll tell you what to do later on. Well, that does a couple of different things that make people feel a little marginalized, that they're not valued as a part of the team, that you're not willing to share the information about the inner workings of the project because, that's above your pay grade kind of thing. And these are things that we somewhat do, not necessarily by choice or out of kind of like malicious intent. We sometimes do it just because, well, we've got all of these things that are going on with a project, and we do need somebody to do all of the toilet room plans while somebody else is doing this meeting and while we're doing that. But sometimes we should always sit back and kind of think to ourselves, yeah, we've got all of these things to do, but I really think that this is a valuable learning tool for the people that are on our team that are younger, that have never done this before. When are they going to get this opportunity if you're not going to give it to them?
That's right. Yeah, it's a great point. And I think ultimately for anyone in an office to have an opportunity to participate and see this, I think it also is a great way as a mentor or a mentoree, is giving them the opportunity to see these things and participate in them, is that they get to learn what do they really like, right? Because it's what I think it was one of you guys said earlier, having these different experiences to see how did that work? I think it was you, Evan, that mentioned, well, how did that work for you? Did you like doing that? Something like that. So by giving the different staff members an opportunity to participate in the different activities, they can go, oh, okay, well, I didn't really care for that, or I don't really like doing that. And I don't want, I'd rather do this part of it. I mean, architecture is a big field and lots of different things that go on in an office and different roles that everyone has to play in a firm, that it gives them the opportunity to see those things. And I just feel that that's very important for everybody. So I try and provide those. And I think at the same time, the other side of that is that the client now recognizes, I'm not dealing with just one person or just even two people. It's like, no, there's a team involved here that is supporting you as the client to get your project done. And we're all members of that team. And I think it's important for the client to recognize that as well.
Yeah. It's funny is we're sitting back kind of listening to us tell these stories about how we were mentored, our advice to how we mentor, how we should mentor, and things like that. And I'm kind of just thinking, how the hell did we get here? How did us three get here when we were almost thrown into the fire and said, figure it out yourself kind of thing? Yeah. Because, it's, you think about the way that a lot of people, and it's, we're not exclusive to this club. I mean, a lot of people have learned this way where it's just, throw them into the fire. Hey, look, we got this really crappy project. It's a small little maintenance shed, and nobody really wants to do this project. Give it to the new kid. And so the new kid says, well, this is great, but I've never done anything in school that had a pitched roof on it. I don't know how to do pitched roofs. Yeah. And then watch me struggle figuring out how to do a pitched roof until I got it right. Exactly. It was sink or swim until I got it right. And I look back at the building. The building's still there, and I drive past it when I'm back home in St. Pete. And, I look at this building, and I think to myself two things. One, God damn, that's an ugly building. and two, holy shit, that's my first building. Yeah. And it's kind of fun to do that. But then when I analyze the struggle that just that simple little building took for me to do, because there was no guidance there for me. It was just figure it out. It's a stupid little 20 by 20 CMU with stucco building with a pitched roof and, clay tile roofing. And it was this simple little building, at least to them. To me, it was like, holy shit, it was like Mount Everest. It was this thing that I've never done before that I needed to figure out how to climb and conquer. And, I both look at that as like, damn. First I think, damn, why the hell did I do that? Or I'm like, damn, how did I do that? Yeah. How did I do that with the limited knowledge that I really had with no guidance? And so I just kind of, think here we all are, we're, I won't say twilight of our career, but we're in our career in a good position in our career, with a lot of experience built up. And, here we are in a position to be able to guide other people's education, post-education education, of guiding them on the rights and wrongs and things to do in the profession, and how to kind of like get along and learn and do all of this stuff that we do every day. And so we kind of see almost as, well, here was how we were taught, and I would like to teach you better than the way I was taught. But
that's like
I was thinking to myself,
right?
I was going to say,
exactly,
it's been on the tip of my tongue for a while now. I just was waiting for Cormac to pause. It's like parenting. I'm not going to raise my kids the way I was raised.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my son and I had that conversation just the other day. It was like, I'm trying to do better than, my dad tried to do better than his dad. I'm trying to do better than my dad, just so that we can keep being better as we go. And so, but I'm thinking to myself, as we're talking about where we came from, kind of like in the post-education education to where we are now, it's kind of interesting to kind of just say, well, you know what? We had a pretty rough start, or we were just thrown right into the fire, or however we were trained, and we got there.
Yep.
There's lots of ways to do it.
There's lots of ways to do it. Not necessarily sure we got there and we started off the right way. Exactly. I think we could have been far more efficient with our knowledge gathering if we were guided a little bit better. And I think that's where, to kind of circle back around to the seed of where this talk came from. It was, we're struggling with what's the proper way to guide people in this, like I said, post-education education. How do we get to?
Yeah, I think that this is super important, because if you don't, you have to think long term here. If you're thinking short term and you're just thinking about yourself, and who cares, right? Because all that matters is you. But if you actually want your firm to last another 100 years, how's that going to happen if you just think about you?
Exactly.
There's absolutely no way that that's going to happen. And so if you want a legacy to actually happen, you've got to think long term. You've got to think about how that next generation is going to come up. You've got to think about how you can invest in them and give them the shortcuts and give them the experience to do better faster. And so that has to be an intentional plan on how you're going to get there, because unfortunately, we're all just too busy for that to just happen as a natural byproduct of the day-to-day business. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
And so how are you going to plan that into your day or into your week or into your month or whatever? It's not a full-time job, but it's definitely like a series of check-ins that have to happen. Right? So what's your plan for that? And if you don't have a plan, you got to make one. And I feel like this whole talk about mentorship, a question that I wanted to ask you guys is, do you ever think that you're going to be too old to have a mentor? Or are you already too old to have a mentor? Or what do you think about that?
No. In fact, if you get to the point where you feel like you're too old to have a mentor, it might be time for you to go ahead and retire.
Just move on. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I asked it in kind of a leading way, but I agree. You should have a coach for something. Whether, we've got people who are very high in our company who have speaking coaches, and we have people who are very high in our company who have business coaches, and we can't be good at everything, right? And so it is, everybody kind of sucks at something. So what can I do to augment that and make me better at something? And I feel like it's not too hard, especially with how interconnected everybody is nowadays, to find somebody to help out and mentor or coach or inspire us to do better. And so there's so much opportunity for that now. I don't see how, but I see it all the time. And I guess that's why I bring it up, is that I see a certain, I don't know if it's just a type of person or what, but they don't need that. They're better than that. Or maybe they just feel like they're at the point in their career where they don't feel like they need that anymore. But you can kind of see areas where they clearly do. And I don't want to be that guy, I guess, is why
then if you're that guy, then the profession's going to leave you behind, because this is a quickly changing profession. I mean, the other day, bring your child to work day, I had my daughter and my son in the office, and stories about my son who was sitting there, and he was kind of just like watching what I do every day, and got to have been absolutely excruciatingly boring to him, because most of what I was doing was answering RFIs or answering emails or crafting emails or writing additional service proposals and things like that. And
project manager.
And I may have already, yeah, and I may have said this before, but he's sitting there and he's just like, so when do you draw? When do you start doing architecture?
When do you do that inspiring thing that you love?
And I was like, well, this is architecture. This is what, we do. It's not just
we don't tell anybody about this. You actually, you signed a confidentiality agreement. You can't tell anybody about this.
Exactly. And he was just like, well, what would you think if I went into architecture? I'm like, I think great. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I mean, he wants to be an entomologist, but no,
so
what I was telling him is that the architecture that I'm doing is going to be vastly different from the architecture that you're going to be doing. The process may, the end result may be the same, but the process has been changing over the course of my career. And I can see that it's just getting faster in its change when he would be in there. We're talking, an 8th grader, and in what, 8 years, he would be joining the profession, or 9 years he'd be joining the profession. And just think about how vastly different it would be. I mean, hell.
Well, he'll be programming the robots that put you out of business.
Exactly. I mean, drive your point home about, if you're too old to learn, or be mentored, then, whether or not it's time to leave or not. But, we had this guy who just retired. And here's this guy who is nearing retirement, and, he's mastered how to, just create this, probably some of the most amazing red lines off of just the simple tools within Bluebeam that, really tell more of a story about how to do good documents than anything else that I've seen. And here's a guy literally getting ready to retire. And, everybody's like coming to him asking him, hey, Steve, you're like the master at Bluebeam and stuff. Can you teach me how to do this? And here he is mentoring all of us, how to use Bluebeam properly. And again, this is like a 70-year-old man getting ready to retire who's mastered, like the latest software program. And even though he knew he was retiring, he still didn't stop learning. And that's kind of like where I was going with the story with my son is that this profession is going to continuously change. And if you don't change with it, it's going to leave you behind, and you might as well just go ahead and retire. Now, Steve probably shouldn't have retired, because, he's still a wealth of knowledge, but, it was time. Hell, he got himself a new tiller, rototiller, and he's going to be doing gardening and all that other stuff. And he wanted to do that, spend more time with his rototiller. Honestly, though, I think that he typified a guy who didn't let the profession leave him behind. So I think that's somebody to definitely look up to, rather than the people who are just kind of saying, I don't, I've learned everything that I need to learn. I don't need to learn anymore. Well,
that's a very closed mind attitude.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, then, just to finish this up, how do you actually ask somebody to be a mentor? To me, it's kind of like asking someone out on a date, or asking a celebrity for an autograph, right? It's a little intimidating sometimes, but you guys have any tips specifically about that for people who are maybe looking for a mentor?
It's a hard question, really, because
I agree. But I think it deserves to be addressed.
Oh, it absolutely does, because Neil was bringing up a point about this kind of like almost fear of asking the question, and a lot of times we don't know when somebody's looking for being mentored. We should automatically kind of somewhat assume that if you're like really early in your career, that you not necessarily need a day-to-day kind of mentor, but you almost kind of need like a work buddy that you're paired up with, that you can go and feel comfortable with asking questions about any little thing. You know, Neil brought up, you know, looking for code information and things like that, and being able to ask those questions and just almost, you know, kind of like a work wife type thing. I don't know what you call it, but just, you know, a work buddy type thing.
Being able to shadow somebody.
You know, somebody, exactly. I mean, we've got an interesting kind of dynamic in our office where literally everybody, you know, like Guy will kind of like turn around and say, you know, have you guys ever had this issue with this, and, you know, or an egress situation or something, like, you know, somebody asked today. And, you know, so we just kind of like throw it into the ether of the office, and we've set up kind of like this interesting kind of intranet that, you know, we're able to like just post questions up on, we call it the square. You know, we post questions up on the square, and people start talking about, you know, oh yeah, I've got experience about that and stuff. So it's almost like we're not asking one specific person, we're just kind of asking everybody. And then people kind of chime in with their own experience about it. And that, in a way, that's almost kind of facilitating the digital mentor.
But you guys don't have like a forced mentorship program where everybody gets assigned somebody. It's just kind of team based, like whatever project you're working on.
Yes.
To kind of get people's feet wet with it. And then it's kind of up to a person by person basis to establish true mentorship relationships potentially in the future. I think that's pretty typical. I mean, it does seem, I have a little bit of heartburn over forced mentorship programs, because, you know, maybe you get a fit and maybe you don't. I mean, chances actually are that you don't, as far as like a long-term mentorship thing going on. I feel like the more forced ones are, you know, people are just doing it because they have to then, and I don't feel like the investment goes as deep.
Yeah, because because you're never really going to get like your best out of the person who's being forced to mentor somebody.
Yeah.
But, you know, then there's also kind of like, you know, should like the mentoree have a guidebook or something, like saying, you know, here are some of the things
that's this episode right here.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
Well, I the thing that worked for me, not for me as a mentee, but for somebody else trying to find a mentor, was just somebody else kind of being the advocate and being the middleman. They asked me if I would mentor somebody else, and so that I felt like was a great way to make the introduction and to start the conversation. It wasn't so, then it just wasn't so scary for that real young staff member to just approach me cold and say, I'm looking for this. Instead, you know, they had somebody who was kind of a leader in their studio who just started asking them questions, put two and two together and said, you know, who would be great for you would be Evan. And so then they came to me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And I felt like that was a great way to kind of build that, or at least start that conversation instead of doing the cold call.
Yeah, Evan, I think if the firm, I agree about the force part of this, but I think that if a firm talks about mentorship openly and encourages it, not necessarily forces people to do it, right?
Well, sees a value in it, right?
Yeah, if they see a value, I mean, there's obviously, we've spent an hour talking about the value of it, but I think that if the firm itself takes it upon itself to encourage people to do it, then it doesn't get forced, but it encourages people to seek it out, I think is what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm. And I think that's healthy. That's good.
It's a thing we do, right? Yeah, then it's just like out there.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's out there, and it's not unexpected and maybe almost expected that you will do that. So that, and I think what that does, as you mentioned earlier, Evan, being out with people outside of the office or just even with activities in the office other than just the work activities, it helps build that camaraderie that it just really kind of makes you feel like you belong there. Yeah. And this is a place to learn and grow and enjoy. and becomes your career.
Yeah, because work is not life. It's a piece of your life. And so I think that if you can get involved in a couple or a few of pieces of somebody's life, then it really does make them feel like they're a part of something a little bit more important and a little bigger than just that one piece of their life. They're just their job. And it makes it a lot more personal. So, yeah it's a good encouragement, I think.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. But I want to remind everyone before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to our episode sponsors, and that is ARCAT. Make sure you check out all the features they offer at arcat.com. And we really appreciate their continued sponsorship. So go check them out. They've got some really cool stuff they've been working on that they showed off at the recent AIA conference. So make sure you check them out at arcat.com. And then we also have, and welcome back to HMC Architects for their support. We really appreciate that. And they've been doing some really creative things on the advertising part that we've been really excited to share. So we really appreciate their support. And to learn more about them or become a part of their story, visit them at hmcarchitects.com. And make sure to visit our website at archispeakpodcast.com for links to our catalog of episodes and to sign up for our newsletter, which includes links to everything we mention in the episode. And between episodes, join us on the conversation by visiting the Archispeak Facebook page or on our individual links on Twitter, and also the Archispeak podcast Twitter link as well. We like to chat to other people on there as well. So links to all of that, again, can be found at archispeakpodcast.com. And if you'd like to help out the show even more than just listening, then make sure you do subscribe to the show over on Apple Podcasts. That helps get the word out that other people are seeing it and gets us up a little bit higher on those lists that people do for searching for podcasts. So we really appreciate everyone for subscribing and listening to the show. And please stay subscribed. And thanks again for listening, everyone.
All right. See ya.
Oh, sorry. I needed to wake up. That was really long.
We'll get it a little shorter next time.
It's just like, oh my lordies. Anyway, see ya.
I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. party got started without me. I got needs, I bleed. You can say I beat on the speed. You can say I eat, breathe, race my feet, my face, chase the one day.